Join me in the prayer for illumination. Source of all life, in you are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Open our eyes that we may see the wonders of your word, and give us grace that we may clearly understand and freely choose the way of your wisdom. In your holy name we pray. Amen. A reading from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. Hear the word of the Lord. Now, in the following instructions, I do not commend you, because when you come together, it is not for the better, but for the worse. For, to begin with, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and to some extent, I believe it. Indeed, there have to be factions among you, for only so will it become clear who among you are genuine. When you come together, it is not really to eat the Lord's Supper, for when the time comes to eat, each one of you goes ahead with your own supper, and one goes hungry, and another becomes drunk. What? Do you not have homes to eat and drink in? Or do you not show contempt for the church of God, and to humiliate those who have nothing? What should I say to you? Should I commend you? In this matter, I do commend you. For I received from the Lord what I handed to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took a loaf of bread. When he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took the cup also after supper, saying, "This cup is the covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it, in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat the bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Amen.
lesson this morning comes to us from the Gospel according to Luke, the 14th chapter, beginning with the 7th verse. Listen to what the Spirit is saying to the family of faith this day. When he, Jesus, noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, give this person your place. And then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humble, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He also said to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Now, where you sit in the cafeteria is crucial. So begins a description of the lunchroom social hierarchy of North Shore High School in Evanston, Illinois, from the 2004 film Mean Girls. But it could probably be any shared meal eating context anywhere, including our own dining rooms. Katie Heron, Lindsay Lohan, has just moved to Evanston with her zoologist parents from the bush country of Africa where she was homeschooled. As a result, she thinks she knows all about the survival of the fittest, but the law of the jungle takes on a whole new meaning when this 16-year-old enters public high school for the first time. Where will she fit in? To answer this question, her new friend Janice explains to her the importance of lunchtime. Now, where you sit in the cafeteria is crucial, because you have everybody there. You have your freshmen, your ROTC guys, your preps, your jocks, your nerds, your burnouts. I'm skipping over a number of the more politically incorrect groups, sexually active band geeks, until she finally ends with the warning, beware the plastics, the most popular girls in the school, the mean girls. Now, I went to a big suburban high school, so our cafeteria tables were even more specific. I sat at the basketball-playing honor students with bad haircuts and acne table. I can still remember the time I tried to sit at the basketball-playing honor students with good haircuts and acne. The rejection, the humiliation of it all. Do you remember back to junior high and high school? Do you remember how obvious the pecking order was, the hierarchy of popularity? How important it was to sit with the right folks at lunch? How much it meant to you to have someone invite you to a party, or even just save you a seat at lunch? The clear social demarcations of the various groups from bands, sports teams, burnouts, or whatever. The reserved seats at the back of the bus for the cool kids, and while the remaining ones, typically up by the driver for the less than cool kids. I'd offer more examples, but most of us are probably already reliving some of our worst moments of childhood, and some of us are currently living them. School very much operated and still does operate on a status system where everything counts and everything is counted. Keep our youth in your prayers. Truth be told, I don't think it ends at school. It happens just about everywhere. It happens at work, it happens in our neighborhoods, it happens in our families. I have even been told by a number of our more mature members who live at Timber Hills and other senior living homes that it happens in their communal dining areas. You can't sit at Harriet's table, or that's Walter's chair. Names changed to protect the innocent. And yes, it happens in our churches, in our church? When was the last time you intentionally sat with, talked to somebody outside your regular table? We are a warm and friendly and welcoming community, and while we are not small, we are not a megachurch either. But let's not kid ourselves that we also have members who have never even said hello to one another or who don't know each other's names. But I am less interested this morning with who is sitting in whose place in my pew and gets to sit where during the fellowship time. Why is that person sitting in my spot? And more about the people who aren't even invited to walk through our doors. The people who aren't welcome, don't feel they are welcome to even make the mistake of sitting in someone else's spot. The people for whom we have no room at our table, at God's table. The people who, because of bad theology, a misunderstanding of Jesus' ministry of radical love for all God's children, especially the outcast and the most vulnerable, or because of a painful church experience in their past where they were excluded, ignored, or rejected, for all those reasons and more, believe they are not welcome here. Are they wrong? In today's gospel reading, Jesus is taking on the social code of his day. He lives in an honor and shame culture where status is pretty much everything, and one of the key places where status was displayed is mealtime. Guests of honor were seated close to the host, while those of lesser importance sat farther away. And those who weren't invited at all correspondingly mattered not at all. Status was important, and it could be fragile. To be invited to a better position at the table of an important host wasn't simply an honor. It could also have tangible benefits to your business pursuits as well. Similarly, to be invited to a lower position could affect all dimensions of your life. Jesus, therefore, is touching on matters of great importance as he makes two sets of interesting and interrelated comments. In the first, he gives what seems to be good advice. Don't think too highly of yourself. Be humble. Better to start from a lower position and be invited higher than place yourself ahead of others and ask to move lower. This is the who is sitting in my spot, my pew, my place at the fellowship time question. A question we must ask ourselves, but it is the second commentary that Jesus offers that I want to focus on again this morning. It is not addressed to those attending the banquet, to those attending church, but to those giving it, us. And it moves beyond good advice to something that might have sounded to his audience as totally ridiculous. Don't invite those in a position to do something for you, but rather invite those who cannot give you anything in return: the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. In an honor and shame culture, you see, counting is everything. Status, favors, debts, honors. It's all about counting and reckoning and standing and the rest. Inviting persons to a banquet, whether family, friends, or business associates, put them in your debt and made a claim on them to return this favor to you. It's an I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine kind of world, and meals are a great way to scratch another's back. Which is why Jesus' advice probably sounded ludicrous. Why on earth waste an opportunity for social commerce by inviting those who have nothing to give you, who can do nothing for you, and who typically mean nothing to you, who don't show up to volunteer, who don't greet or usher or help out with coffee, who don't put anything in the offering plate, who don't show up every Sunday, who only show up at Christmas and Easter? Why on earth would you invite them? It's crazy. True enough, but Jesus tells us it is also the kingdom of God. There is no other defense for such counsel, really, except that this is the way God wants us to treat each other. Indeed, it's the way God treats us. creating us, giving us what we need to flourish, caring for us, forgiving us, redeeming us, even though we can do nothing meaningful for God in return. In fact, about the only thing we can do in return, when you think about it, is to share what we've been given with others. We aren't called to invite only those people we need, but to invite all those people who need God. This is the kingdom life, and it stands in stark contrast to the honor and shame world in which we live. Yes, the honor and shame world in which we live, here and now. The banner behind me is a beautiful reminder of our calling to invite and welcome all people, especially those people who have historically felt uninvited and unwelcome. But let's not limit ourselves to believing we are only referring to people of the LGBTQI community, because unfortunately, that is only a small portion of the people who didn't get an invitation, feel there is no place for them at God's table, especially while the church believes it is our table. Seriously, is the invitation only for those who are baptized? Only for those who profess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior? No. The Presbyterian Church USA did away with that type of exclusivity years ago. What about those who look differently than us? And I don't just mean the color of our skin. What about the person with tattoos on their face, dreadlocks and ear gauges, with dyed hair, dark makeup, and black fingernails? What about the person in the "Nevertheless She Persisted" t-shirt or the "Make America Great Again" cap? What about the person who doesn't walk like us, who can't walk, who is in a wheelchair, who doesn't have legs? What about the person living with depression, with borderline personality disorder, with gender dysphoria and schizophrenia, with Alzheimer's, with dementia, with Parkinson's, with cancer? The people who make us uncomfortable and remind us of our own mortality? What about the exhausted mother with the enthusiastic children? What about the father who only sees his children every other weekend? What about the unemployed, the grieving, the angry, the resentful, the hopeless? What about someone who is homeless, who lives out of their car and who hasn't showered in a few days? What about the abused, the assaulted, the molested? What about the abuser? What about the addict, the alcoholic, the felon? What about the person who does come inside, who feels an overwhelming need to be in God's presence in the church, but doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't sing the hymns or stand at the right times or say the prayers? Are they invited? Are they welcome here? The bright and beautiful colors on this banner represent all these people and are a reminder to us that they are all invited and they are all welcome. We only need to invite and welcome them. I really don't want to tell us all one more time about the importance of inviting and welcoming others, but I think it is important that we all be reminded that God has given us all good things for no good reason and invites us to do the same for others. I want us to challenge ourselves to take our faith to the degree that it helps navigate the daily decisions and situations that attend each of our lives. Quite frankly, the generations that follow us, the ones trying to navigate the school cafeterias, won't keep coming to church unless it makes a difference in their lives, unless the church looks and behaves differently than the lunchroom, and is working to make their world, our world, look differently as well. And this passage invites us to think very seriously about what the kingdom life, the reign of God, might look like, not only in our churches and schools, but pretty much anywhere where 2 or 3 or 100 or 300 human beings are gathered together. If we are only going to serve feasts and banquets for ourselves and argue about who is sitting in whose place, if we are going to guard our table and make sure the wrong kind of people don't sit at it, if we are only going to invite those people who are just like us, those people who can do something for us, if we invite anyone at all, then very soon we, the church, this congregation, will be alone at our tightly defended table. Perhaps you may have noticed more openings already recently. But if instead we open the table, God's table, to all those who are hungry, who are weary, who are lonely, who feel ignored, excluded, and rejected, if we invite and welcome all God's children, the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, those people who have nothing to offer us, to share in the joyful feast which God has prepared, well then, the kingdom of God will have been revealed right here among us. And we will all be there, seated together at the table, God's table. We must make room at the table. Go and invite. And to God alone be all the glory. Amen.